Scrum artifact. Scrum artifacts represent work or value. They are designed to maximize transparency of key information. Thus, everyone inspecting them has the has the same basis of adaptation. Each artifact contains a commitment to ensure it provides information that enhances transparency and focus against which progress can be measured. For product backlog, it is the product goal. For the sprint backlog, it is the sprint goal. For the increment, it is the definition of done. These commitments exist to reinforce precision and the Scrum value for the Scrum team and their stakeholders. Product backlog. The product backlog is an emergent order list of what needed to be improved the product. It is the singular source of work undertaken by Scrum team. Product backlog that can be done by the Scrum team within one sprint are deemed ready for selection of a sprint planning event. They usually acquire the degree of transparency after redefining activities. Product backlog refinement is the act of breaking down and further defining product backlog items into smaller, more precise items. This is an ongoing activity to add details such as description, order, size, attributes often vary with the domain of work. The developers who will be doing the work are responsible for the sizing. The product owner may influence the developer by helping them understand and select trade-off. Commitment protocol. The protocol describes a further future state of product which can serve as a target for the Scrum team to plan against. The product goal is in the product backlog. The rest of the product backlog emergent to define what will fulfill product goal. A product is a vehicle to deliver value. It has clear boundary, known stakeholders, well-defined users or customers. A product could be a service, a physical partner, or something more abstract. The product goal is the long-term objective for the Scrum team. They must fulfill one objective before taking one or the next. Sprint goal. Sprint backlog. The sprint backlog is composed of the sprint goal via the set of product backlog items selected for the sprint as well as actionable plan for delivering the increment. The sprint backlog is a plan by the developer. It is a highly visible real-time picture of work that developer plan to accomplish during the sprint in order to achieve the sprint goal. Consequently, the sprint backlog is updated throughout the sprint as more is learned. It should have enough detail that they can inspect their progress in the daily scrum. Commitment sprint goal. The sprint goal is the single objective for the sprint. Although a sprint goal is a commitment by the developers, it provides flexibility in terms of the exact work needed to achieve it. The sprint goal also create a coherence and focus, encouraging the Scrum team to work together rather than one initiatives. The sprint goal is created during the sprint planning event and then added to the sprint backlog. As the developers work during the sprint, they keep the sprint goal in mind. The work turns out to be different than they expected. They collaborated with the product owner to negotiate the scope of a sprint backlog within the sprint without affecting the sprint goal. Increment. An increment is a concrete stepping stone towards a protocol. Each increment is additive to all prior increment throughout verify ensuring that all increment work together in order to provide value. The increment must be usable. Multiple increments may be created within a sprint. The sum of increments is presented at the sprint review. The supporting precision. However, an increment may be delivered to stakeholders prior to the end of the sprint. The sprint review should never be considered a gate to release value. Work cannot be considered part of increment if it doesn't meet the definition of done. Commitment definition done. The definition done is a formal description of the state of the increment when it means the quality measure required for product. The moment a product backlog item meets the definition done, an increment is born. The definition done creates transparency by providing everyone a shared understanding of what work was completed as part of the increment. If a product backlog item doesn't meet the definition done, it cannot be released or even presented at the sprint review. Instead, it returns to the product backlog for future consideration. If the definition of done for an increment is part of the standard of the organization, the Scrum team must follow it as a minimum. If it is not an organization standard, the Scrum team must create a definition done appropriate for the project. The developers are required to conform up to the definition done. If there are multiple Scrum teams working together on a product, they must mutually define and compile with the same definition of done. And note, the Scrum is free, offered in this guide. The Scrum framework, as outlined herein, is immutable. While implementing only parts of the Scrum is possible, the result is not Scrum. Scrum exists only in its entirely and functions well as container for other techniques, methodology, and practices. Acknowledgement people. Of the thousand of people who contributed to Scrum, we should single out those who were instrumental at the start. Jeff Sutherland worked with Jeff McCann and John Scott Scrum, no Dell, and the Zerxwer worked with Mike Smith and Chris Martin, and all of them worked together. Many others contributed in ensuring years without their help, Scrum would be refined as it today. Scrum Guide History. Ken Sagarwa and Zeph Sutherland first co-presented Scrum at the OPSAL conference in 1995. It was essential documented the learning that Ken and Zeph gained over the previous years and made public the first formal definition of Scrum. The Scrum kind document Scrum as developer evolved and sustained it for 30 plus years by the Zeph Sutherland and Ken Scarver. Other sources provide pattern, process, and insight that complement the Scrum framework. These may increase productivity, value, creativity, and satisfaction with the result. The complete history of Scrum is described elsewhere to honor the first places where it was tried, proven, we recognize individual NIC newspaper, fidelity, investment, and IDC.